Are just 4 days away from the start of the new Premier League season and clubs are still scrambling to sign players. Spurs are in the market and we've got big developments which involves a Manchester City player. Also on the way, Rasmus Højlund is wanted by several clubs in Europe. Could he leave before the window closes? From the blue half of Manchester to the red half and talk about this guy, Rasmus Højlund. His days at Manchester United could be numbered. How close is Rasmus Højlund, Dan, to leaving Man United?
Well, look, I think after Benjamin Šeško signed over the weekend, have to say he was paraded at Old Trafford before the game with the likes of Matheus Cunha and Brian Mbeumo. There's a lot more questions over Rasmus Højlund's future. Of course, a player they spent £72 million on just a few years ago. And we understand AC Milan are now in talks with Manchester United over a potential move for Højlund. What I think United will want out of that type of potential deal is, I think they would be happy with a loan, but with an obligation to buy in terms of going into the future. One thing I do want to say about Højlund, though, Matt, is yes, his future has been in question, but I've been around United in the last few days. I was at the training ground reopening on Friday, where the whole first team squad, Ruben Amorim, were all there. Højlund was there, smiles, acting very professional on Saturday, the last pre-season game at Old Trafford, seeing what seems to be his replacement getting paraded before the game at Old Trafford. During the penalty shootout against Fiorentina, he acted pretty positively amongst his teammates. And I think that type of behaviour has to be, seen as a real positive in a window where, for various reasons, you see players not training with their clubs or making huge statements because of their future. You have to admire the way Højlund's gone about his business, whether he remains at United or not past the deadline.
Kevin, Man United want a permanent sale. Are AC Milan in a position where they could buy Højlund, or is it going to be more of a loan situation? And how high is his stock still in Italy? Because that's obviously where he came from for Manchester United in the first place, scored a few goals out there.
I think it is still high. I think it's interesting as well, if you look at Joshua Zirkzee, for example, he's still quite highly rated in Italy. He was being linked with Juventus not that long ago. So players like Zirkzee and Højlund have done it in Italy, not over a long spell of time, but they have proven that they can score goals, make goals. And what he did at Atalanta was very impressive, and that's what caused United to move for him and spend so much money. In terms of Milan, their situation's really interesting because they brought in Santi Jimenez, the Mexican striker from Feyenoord, and you thought, right, he's set to be there for the next few years. There's talk of him being moved on even now, which I think is bizarre, quite frankly. There's talk of them not only moving for Højlund, but Dusan Vlahovic as well, who Juventus are desperate to get off their wage bill. And so if both of those were to come in, Milan suddenly wouldn't have room for Jimenez. So there does seem to be real interest, and I just wonder whether it'll end up being a loan with an obligation to buy something like that to give Milan a bit of room.
And just a quick word on Højlund. I mean, you also, even though he came out in pre-season and was adamant he wants to stay at United, against Fiorentina on Saturday, he was an unused substitute. Mason Mount started as a 9 instead of Højlund, and he didn't come off the bench whatsoever. So for Højlund now, I think he's getting an indication he's not part of Ruben Amorim's plans going forward. And I will go on about this for the whole window. It is a World Cup year. He needs to play football for his own international future to be at next summer's World Cup.
Well, he actually came on board before Ineos, didn't he, Højlund? So if he goes, is this a sign that Ruben Amorim is slowly getting together his kind of team, his kind of players?
Absolutely, and I think we can have a look at some of the players Manchester United have signed since Ineos have joined the club, and it's very interesting. The two positions that they haven't signed in, or their gaps in that team, are potentially the two that they might be looking at before the deadline. We know that if they can, they would like to reinforce that midfield. But I think when you look at Højlund's position, the one player isn't there, Joshua Zirkzee, is also potential, of course, as a forward. But I think when you look at Højlund, he does maybe just come as a bit of a victim of this pre-Ineos era where, Jason Wilcox, Christopher Vell have really led the recruitment at Manchester United. And of course, Vell, Kevin, was a huge reason as to why Šeško joined United, because he had scouted him at RB Salzburg and RB Leipzig as well.
Yeah, knew about him for many years, really pushed for that. And I think Šeško is a sign of where they're trying to go to. But we said that to some extent about Højlund as well. I think it's going to be about creating a culture in which these younger players can thrive. So they've gone for an interesting blend. Some more experienced players like Mbeumo, like Cunha, but also somebody like Šeško, who I think does have enormous potential, but has already got a bit of a track record. I think it's a real shame with Højlund. I still think there's a really good player in there. I just think he's kind of been chewed up a bit at Old Trafford, and I think that can happen to a number of players. We've seen it with so many.
Yeah, and just when you look at those signings again, I think the one thing they all have in common is physicality, versatility in the majority of them. And I think that's really interesting in terms of potential any more interest in Kolospoli at Brighton as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. We'll keep an eye on that. He might be coming into the Premier League, just sort of ramp up the interest a little bit more. These are the names we've picked. Let's start with Gianluigi Donnarumma, mentioned him before the break.
Yep.
Dan, linked with Man United.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like it could go on for the next few weeks in terms of just speculation around Donnarumma's future, purely because, of course, PSG have signed Chevalier now. That's now confirmed and official. And Manchester United, I don't think we speak about this enough. You know, I think if we spoke about any other club, we'd be talking about how they're going into the season at this moment in time with question marks over their number one keeper not starting, in terms of Andre Onana still suffering with his injury. And Altay Bayındır showed last season he can deputise at times, wasn't always completely solid. And you also have Tom Heaton, who has played in pre-season as well. So for Manchester United, though, the focus is on departures, but I think this link with Donnarumma will continue until Andre Onana's status and fitness is really confirmed over the next week or so.
It's quite an unusual market opportunity to have a guy who was amazing in the Champions League for PSG, is an established Italian international, won the Euros with them, but PSG have brought in Lucas Chevalier, see him as the long-term number one, and so Donnarumma, with a year left on his deal, is possibly surplus to requirements, which, again, is a running theme in the show. Football changes quickly, right?
Yeah.
So there is a genuine opportunity there. He's not without his flaws. He does make mistakes. Sometimes in traffic, in set-piece situations, he's not great. Brilliant shot stopper.
Right, I think he's probably the best shot stopper in the world. Right, we're going to be quick now because we spent a lot of time on Donnarumma, 20 seconds on each. Nico Paz, good fit for Spurs or not?
Yes, brilliant player, creative, does the defensive work as well, could fit into lots of different roles. I like him a lot.
Kingsley Coman, possibly to Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia. Did that surprise you?
No, because Bayern have been trying to shift him on to make space for other recruits. And Coman seems open to the move, so it could work for all parties.
His trophy collection is pretty impressive, though, isn't it?
Just a bit, and his CV at the clubs he's been at. Terrific player.
How about Evan Gesson? That's signed, sealed and delivered for Aston Villa. How excited should the Aston Villa fans be about him?
I've been banging the drum for Gesson on this show.
I know, that's why I asked you.
Really like him, strong, mobile, has come on leaps and bounds in the last year at Nice. I think he's a terrific signing.
Guys, absolute pleasure. We got through a load today, didn't we? Loads of topics. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Let's give you a transfer update, shall we? And Tottenham have approached Manchester City about signing Savinho. City, though, don't want to sell. AC Milan are in talks with Manchester United over the signing of the striker Rasmus Højlund. Milan want to do a loan deal with an option to buy. Nicholas Jackson was again absent from Chelsea's squad for their pre-season friendly against AC Milan. Jackson has told Chelsea that he wants to consider his options to play for another club. Malik Chow will have a Newcastle medical today ahead of a £35 million move from AC Milan. Bournemouth have agreed a deal for the Lille defender Bafode Diakite. It's understood the package is worth £30.3 million with 4.3 million in add-ons. Brentford have held talks with Bournemouth about signing Dango Ouattara. There is no agreement yet, but talks are understood to have been positive around the deal being agreed. Sunderland have confirmed the signing of left-back Arthur Masuraki, remember him, on a 2-year deal. Ipswich have announced the signing of Chuba Akpom on an initial loan deal from Ajax.